Hello friends, good morning, afternoon, evening, whenever you're watching this. I hope you're having an awesome day and I hope your week's been going well. I am back with another video and I'm going to be discussing some of the classics that I had on my TBR for this year that I wanted to tackle and just kind of try out, you know, get my bearings, see what I enjoy. And this is actually a part 2 and the final part to this video. The first one, if you haven't seen it, is where I was reviewing 4 of the non-fiction and kind of life experience classic books that I read throughout the year, which is a goal of mine that I wanted to get to. And this one being part 2 is more just like Gothic literature. I sort of bumbled them in together, but we also have an epic poem which I'm sure could be categorized as other things, but anyway, so yeah, if you haven't yet seen part 1, I'll link it in the cards for you if you are interested. And yes, now let's get into the reviews. Okay, so starting with what I think was actually the last one out of this stack that I got to. So let's start with that one. That is Beowulf, which is translated by Seamus Heaney, or Heaney, I'm not too sure, I think it might be Heaney, and is actually written by an unknown author. So this was an interesting one for sure. I actually gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. And despite everyone that screams at you not to read the introduction for classics because they do give away so much and they just assume everyone's read everything, and that's not always the case. I understand it in academic, like when you're studying it, because it might be easy and helpful to read the introduction and get more of an understanding, but going into it just purely from an enjoyment basis, it's not fun to be spoiled. However, in saying that, I actually read that first just to kind of really get a grasp of what this was about, because I didn't really know an awful lot, and what I thought it might have been about was a complete different story. It was something else that was in my head, so I found that actually to be quite helpful. But the thing that I benefited the most from was actually the marginal notes in here, which are something that the translator put in, and it basically just briefly summarizes each context, each paragraph of the poem. What they're called, stanzas, I'm not too sure, I don't know the terminology, I do apologize, and it just breaks it down in a really basic English way, and I found that really helpful. And in fact, I found really early on that rather than relying on that to understand what was going on, I was kind of using that as a tool to double check what I'd already understood from the actual body of the poem, which I was really happy about, because I thought this was going to be one I was really going to struggle with, because it's like old Anglo-Saxon English, so it's very like just very old and it's something I've not studied before, so I wasn't sure how I was going to get on with that, but I understood it. It was translated in a way that was very accessible, I find, personally, and yeah, that was an achievement. So what is this about? We are following this basic epic, I want to say odyssey, this epic story of the life of Beowulf, who is this kind of victorious hero. He basically comes to the aid of, I'm going to forget names and places and terms, I do apologise, but he comes to the aid of this king across the water from him, and he wants to rid him of this evil fiend called Grendel, who is this carnivorous, human, flesh-devouring monster creature of sorts that has been wreaking havoc on that land. And no one has been able to defeat him before. He comes to the halls of Hrothgar, I want to say, and just completely ravishes everything. So Beowulf takes this challenge and he wants to kill off this villain, and it's basically his story, his highs, his lows, his successes, his tragedy, as he becomes famous for all these epic deeds that he does, and it goes all the way up to his old age and things like that. There's dragons in here. It's just a very epic story, and I thought it was quite interesting for it to be told in the form of like a poem. So as well as being shocked at how easily I was able to understand things, because I had no previous, you know, I might just be blowing my own trumpet and it might be just a really easy text, but having no background kind of academic learning of this or any understanding, I was really shocked about that, which is a good shock. But I was also happily shocked at how quickly I enjoyed this as well. Like, I was rooting for everything. Like, I was so excited to see the battles, the descriptions of it all. It was just so vivid and I could see it playing out in my head. The only thing that kind of got me a little bit, and maybe is why it probably dropped a star, is it got very repetitive. And I don't mean necessarily in how the story unfolded, but more so when Beowulf was recounting his deeds. I felt like it didn't need to be actually like fleshed out on the page, him telling someone what he's done, when we've literally just lived through that experience. Like, it was just a bit of a copy and paste and a bit unnecessary, I find. But yeah, this was awesome. This was epic. I gave this one a 4 stars. Okay, so I want to say maybe the first, or one of the first books that I got to out of this classics challenge that I wanted to set for myself this year, which, by the way, I do have a video on that separately as well. It is the 8 classics I wanted to get to, which you might not find that you need to watch now because I'm reviewing said books. But anyway, I think this was like the first, or one of the first ones I got to this year, and that is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. This one was a very interesting and enjoyable read, one of which I also gave a 4 out of 5 stars to. So we are following Dorian Gray, basically, and the people surrounding him, and he's a very vain and beautiful man, and he captures a lot of attention. One particular noteworthy person that he captures the attention of is this artist. I think the artist is called Basil. Yeah, Basil Hallward, I think that was him. And he's so kind of enchanted by his beauty that he wants to paint him. But in doing so, some sort of dark magic is imbued within this painting, and it captures the evil lurking within Dorian Gray, making him staying almost immortal, staying young forever, so it seems. But everything cruel and sinister and evil that he does, the painting will age and show signs of his age, basically, and the misdeeds that he's done. And it's a really interesting concept. I feel like it's something that has definitely been taken inspiration from in so many things, and it was just really fun to kind of read the source material of such a well-known story. I feel like everyone generally knows the concept and the gist of The Picture of Dorian Gray, but like, reading it was another experience. Just like Beowulf, I was happy to see that it was quite easy to absorb, easier than I expected, and I really think that the appendices helped with that. There were maybe a touch too many, but flicking back to them in real time as I was reading helped to kind of clarify what certain things meant, how it was in relation to the time of the setting and the time it was written, and just some added context that really kind of helped deliver the rich variety of the story. Sometimes I found that when it came to Dorian and his kind of absorption into everything that was beautiful and almost this obsession he had with it, it did get a little bit tedious to read. But I think that was down to maybe like its laboriously descriptive tone during those times. It was just kind of dry and I was like, okay, I get it, you're obsessed with beauty, let's move on. I was wondering when the tone would get darker, when it would switch to this kind of macabre tone, because I went into this knowing it would be like a Gothic literature and I was just kind of waiting for that to settle in, and just when I was thinking that, it took a really dark turn and I very much enjoyed that. I think one of the things that I found frustrating with this one was that it didn't delve into either the science or the magic behind the painting. Like, I wanted to know, maybe there was themes and hints of a possible perhaps, I don't know, perchance, that I was just missing, I didn't understand. But I would have really have liked us to get an inkling of an understanding of what made this painting different, what made Basil's artwork different from other works that he's done before, because he's never before captured something so sinister. Nothing's ever aged. It's never had this magical potency of making the subject matter not age, you know? Was it something with Dorian himself? Was it something like a negative intentions that had in the air, in the universe. What was it like? That was never really discussed, and I understand that wasn't the theme. It was more, you know, it was targeting like maybe social constructs and such. I don't know. It was focusing on other things. I get that, but for me, that would have just really like pitched it up to a 5-star, I feel. I also noticed how heavily edited this was, because there were, again, flicking through with the appendices, there were a lot of sexual tones that wasn't acceptable in the time. So discussing in the back of it how many times it had to get edited, what was originally cut out of it, all that sort of stuff. It was interesting to see, but it was frustrating that as an author and a creative individual, Oscar Wilde had to be kind of halted on that front, you know. But yeah, nevertheless, very much enjoyed this one. Glad to have read this one and glad to have it in my collection. Alright, next up I have Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury, and this is a stunning edition. I absolutely love it. It's one of the fantasy masterworks editions. I've got lots of the science fiction ones, but only like 1 or 2 of these ones, and they're beautiful. They're by Golands, which is an imprint of Orion Publishing Group. Anyway, enough about the beauty. I feel like Dorian Gray's rubbing off on me there. Into the actual content of this. So this is a book that I had been putting off since I bought it, once I found out that it was part of a series. However, after some unearthing, some digging, I came to the decision that you didn't need to read them like in order necessarily, only if you wanted more context. And a lot of people say the first book specifically doesn't really need to be read, basically. So I just threw caution to the wind and just went for this and read it as a standalone, and I very much enjoyed it. So this is following 2 boys, Will and what's his name? Why do I forget all the time? Will and Jim, yeah, I think that's it. Who are kind of, you can see they're kind of growing apart as friends. They're very different, very opposing characters, but there's always been something that's just connected to them, something that's kept them, you know, entertained and connected as friends. Anyway, there's this carnival that comes to town one night, and a lot of suspicious and dark and seedy things are happening there, and the 2 boys get caught up in this whirlwind adventure of trying to figure out what the heck's going on. People are going missing, sinister activities are happening. What is going on? This was fantastic. I really did enjoy this one. I gave this also a 4 stars. Very much enjoyed this one. Originally I was a little bit confused and I wasn't entirely sure what to think of the writing style, because at both times it was lyrical yet confusing, so that kind of put me in 2 states of mind. I was like, oh, this is interesting, but also what? But I think I got around to appreciating it. Let's see if there are some pretty sections. I think I already read one of them when I actually did the wrap up for this, but let's see if I can find some beautiful words. Let's see, without spoiling anything. So I have a section here which was a really beautiful description. It was basically just discussing flitting in and out of dreams, that really captured my interest and was written really nicely. So it says here, at dawn, a juggernaut of thunder wheeled over the stony heavens in a spark-throwing tumult. Rain fell softly on town cupolas, chuckled from rain sprouts, and spoke in strange subterranean tongues beneath the windows where Jim and Will knew fitful dreams, slipping out of one, trying another for size, but finding all cut from the same dark, moulded cloth. No, that just sounded really like, I don't know, something about it, you know, it just sounded beautiful. And then there was things like this. This was kind of scary, but the atmosphere there really conjured up this kind of creepy atmospheric vibe. And it also, in terms of character growth at this point in the story, added to this paranoia they must have had at the time. So I'll read you a short passage there. It says, so when they talked again, it was still in whispers. Deep forests, dark caves, dim churches, half-lit libraries were all the same. They tuned you down. They dampened your ardour. They brought you to the murmurs and soft cries of fear of raising up phantom twins of your voice, which might haunt corridors long after your passage. Oh, just very Gothic. So yeah, As you can tell, it has a roundabout way of saying things, but also it's quite beautiful, hence why I was confused at the beginning. I also really enjoyed that this had really short chapters actually. It kind of just got you invested into the adventure quickly. I felt that it had this pacey, tension to it that just had me really invested basically. I really enjoyed the themes that there was like friendship and just struggling maybe to connect and growing up too fast, growing apart. It was a really awesome book. Okay, and lastly to talk about today is Dracula by Bram Stoker. I read this as a buddy read with Jem from Read a Book Jen, and we both very much enjoyed it. So this one I gave the highest. I think everything was 4 stars, but this one I gave a 4.5 stars. So yeah, probably my favourite I guess out of the 4 here today. So let's just skip over what Dracula's about. I feel like another one, you know, an age-old epic story that has been redone, reinterpreted, inspired by many a times in many different forms and formats. So let's just get into the review portion. I loved this non-traditional writing style that we had. It was told in the form of kind of like letter writing to and from each other, and you really got a glimpse of characters, and not necessarily the characters that were writing the letters, but characters they were talking about as well, and kind of getting into the headspace of the person writing the letter about this person. And it really fleshed out this tone to kind of have all these different facets of people and how they're interpreted by others. Like, that was so cool, and it really built up the story, made it more believable as, you know, them as people. Gothic imagery that was described was just really immersive and really set this atmospheric tone. It just was perfect for the concept of vampires and old English countrysides, and it just worked beautifully, just what I wanted. Was a little bit disappointed in the fallout. I feel like the last 3 chapters really dragged, and then all of a sudden the final part was done. So I feel like the pacing is definitely a bit off there. It's almost like he wasn't sure how to wrap it up neatly. So that was annoying, because it like obviously building to this outcome, and it just didn't feel right, you know. I also really found it interesting how the female characters were portrayed in this book. For me, I don't know if it's just me being cynical, but I felt like the women were sort of described as angelic, and everyone wants to look after them and rush to their aid, which was, I guess, you know, chivalrous, or whatever the word is, chivalrous, gentlemanly of the time. But then the next minute they were talking about wanting to be married to a particular woman, and the descriptions they used, and also remembering how angelic and childlike they described them to be, it just felt predatory. And discussing that when I was talking to Gemma about it, she was like, oh yeah, I can see what you mean actually. It was just, it felt a bit strange. Like, on one hand you're saying, oh, they're a child and I want to protect them with all my heart, and the next thing you're saying you want to marry them, and the childlike qualities are clearly attractive to them. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was just a bit strange. Anyway, I adored this. Absolutely enjoyed the story of Dracula, and will continue loving reimaginings and interpretations of it. I'm sure I will. Alright, so that is it for my reviews of the last 4 books in the Gothic literature category of classics that I read this year. I've also read other things spliced in between. I've read other classics that I didn't realise were classics at the time, so I'm getting there. I'm clearly being gravitated towards them now after having a more clear intent of picking them up this year, so I'm very happy with that. Maybe at the end of the year I'll come back and do a little list and star ratings of all the classics I managed to get through, if I read a substantial amount, or even just because. Kind of check in all year long for this challenge, I guess. But anyway, let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them, and if you have any recommendations, I would love to know. Thank you so much for watching, and I shall speak to you in another video soon. Bye.